So it was the second section of this sixth Śānti Mantra that we discussed in our previous class. The section that we discussed was sarvaṁ brahmaupaniṣadaṁ. All is Brahman of the Upanishads. In the understanding of the Upanishads, this is an upasana. An upasana means a thought or an idea when we have chosen it as an object of our meditation, even based on simply faith. Because the Vedantic masters make this clear distinction between two types of meditations. One is the meditation which follows experience, that is nididhyasana, which follows firm conviction. That is what is known in the Upanishads as nididhyasana. Also from the root dhyai, which is the Sanskrit word dhyana, meditation. The same root is used there. And so sentences such as aham brahmasmi, I am that pure consciousness, or tattvamasi, you are that, these quintessential sentences should never be accepted out of faith. But a person should engage with them, a person first should listen them, try to understand the purport, the meaning, what the teacher wishes to convey, and then engage with those ideas. How is it possible? How can this be true? This doesn't seem like true. That is what is called manana, critical analysis. And only then, when it has been critically analyzed, then, and when it seems logical, then it has to be also tested on the basis of experience. But sarvaṁ brahmaupaniṣadaṁ, this is an upasana. It occurs in the context of upasana in the Upanishads, and that is why it is also something that can be initially, for the sake of meditation, can be accepted out of faith, that because the masters say it, because the teachers, my teachers have said it, because the masters of the Upanishads are saying it, therefore it must be true, and therefore let me meditate on it. Even such meditation based on faith, simply on faith, prepares a sadhaka for some radical transformation. And the point that the masters here make, and if you remember, some of you were here when I was teaching the Ishavasya Upanishad. In one of the mantras there are two mantras in Ishavasya Upanishad which speak of the same realization, but in one case they speak of it to know after the masters have taught it, that I am in all and all are in me. To accept this, to see this after one has heard this from the masters, even that, which means now the teacher is not speaking of inner experience, but he says that even if this much is accepted out of faith, at least it can lift us out from our tendency to hate and to commit violence. Faith cannot remove ignorance. Faith cannot remove suffering. That is very clear. That is why the same thing then has been mentioned in the second mantra, that someone who knows this, who experiences this, he doesn't grieve and he doesn't get confused. He doesn't remain ignorant. So, but for that inner experience, ignorance can only be overcome through inner conviction, through inner experience, for which we require the practical path of yoga. The complete removal of grief is only possible when this wisdom arises as an inner experience. But before that, even to accept this much on faith, that everything that I perceive through my senses is a manifestation of that pure consciousness, at least reduces dvesha, it reduces hatred, it reduces the human tendency of inflicting suffering on others through one's deeds, words, and thoughts. So there, even to accept this out of faith is beneficial. And of course, the realization, the state of mind towards which this realization leads, I point this out again and again as we see it in the Upanishads, is this complete eradication of a sense of someone being essentially different from ourselves. And that is why when you look at the Vedanuvachana, as they are known in the Upanishads, which means utterances. Can we say exclamations, or something that you say when you are tremendously happy? Exclamations, yes, we can use that word. Exclamations that follow realization. And these exclamations can be found in various Upanishads, because one of the work of the Upanishads is to collect such exclamations, post-realization exclamations of the great masters, of the different masters. And one of them says that he or she belongs to me and they don't belong to me. They are the others. This is a consideration of those who have still a very tiny little heart. When the heart opens, when the heart becomes universal, udara charitanam, when the action becomes universal, then vasudhaiva kutumbakam, then this entire earth becomes like one family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam has become so famous. Everybody speaks it. Even the Prime Minister quotes it. But very few people realize from where it originates. It originates from one of the Upanishads, Māhaṁ, and it occurs in the context of such post-realization exclamations, that this entire earth is one single family. I repeat these ideas again and again because for me they are foundational. Everything that we are doing should lead towards creating such a state of mind. And for this, it is important that even if we are using the word Brahman, even if we are using the word Atman, we should not get confused with the descriptions. Otherwise, we will start asking questions that what about the Buddha when he says that anatta, non-self, is the supreme principle? Not only the Buddha says it. The Sanskrit word anatmya has been used in the Upanishads itself, but in a very specific significance. But the point that I'm trying to make is that a sadhaka of a practical path should use these words and take the implication and not get lost in those words, because as I repeatedly point out, that this is the spirit of yoga. Whenever a master comes to the fundamental, practical spirit of yoga, we see it repeatedly that there they become united. I have been speaking of the Jaina master Haribhadra, 5th, 6th century yoga master, who describes the idea of yoga from a Jaina perspective, not from a Sankhya perspective like Patanjali, not from a Vedantic perspective like other texts such as Yoga Vasishtha or the Yoga Upanishads, not from a Buddhist perspective such as the Yogacara traditions, but from a Jain perspective, a little explored part of yoga. And yet he incorporates teachings from all the different systems into his Jaina view of yoga, but at the same time remaining totally committed to what makes him a Jaina, not giving up his very foundation, and yet deeply respectful to other views of yoga also. And the reason, one of the reasons is, he gives a simple example, which I have given so many times, but I always thought that this is an example I have thought of, but now when I'm reading it, I realize that he has already thought of it. And this is what happens again and again. You think that you have thought something new, and then you just realize somewhere that somebody has already said it. So he says that no city has a single approach road. Every city can be approached from different sides. And there are from different directions. The same city can be approached from different directions. There is no single correct path that leads. Mostly it depends where the person is. If somebody gives me a call, I want to come to Rishikesh, the first question that I will ask is, where are you? If he is in Badrinath, then I will tell him another path. If he is in Delhi, then another path. If he is maybe in this side around Najibabad, I will tell him another path. Because there are so many paths depending on where the person is. This thought originally came to me. One of my most, which I see as one of the most important times of my life, was the 1 month that I spent in Israel and Palestine back in 2008, and saw the conflict, especially the conflict originating from narrow-minded religiosity, to experience it firsthand. It exists everywhere, but somehow that there it gave me the opportunity to experience it really directly. And when I was going from Nazareth, the holy city of Nazareth, to Jericho, to one of the most ancient cities, I think they say it's more than 10,000 years old, we had to travel quite a lot in the West Bank, and there were several checkpoints there. And what I could see is that several approach roads to several cities were not only blocked, but completely destroyed, in the sense that big holes were dug, you can say dug out of the ground, so that nobody can use those roads to reach those cities. And that is when I realized that it is not, of course, it is not only whenever conflict comes, for whatever reason, whether it is religion or whether it is more, maybe just religion gets caught up into it. There are many other reasons such as water, land, which are the actual reasons of fight. And religion sort of just groups these people together and adds to the conflict, makes it sometimes more deadly. But whenever this narrow-mindedness comes, we don't only block approach roads to external cities from different sides so that we can control. The purpose was, when I asked why did they do this, is that because they want to control the one approach road so that everybody comes and goes only from there, so that there is total control on who is going in and who is going out. This is sort of what religion on a superficial level has done everywhere. That only one path, this path, is the correct path. Every other path is the wrong path. So that you can only reach the goal from this path. And for this purpose, they don't even care if they have to destroy other approaches, because they want everyone just so that who goes in and who comes out can be fully brought under control. So that is what I see as religious narrow-mindedness. But when it comes to yoga, the beautiful thing is that all the different philosophical, mystical traditions of India, who had vastly opposing views and therefore were constantly engaged in debates to prove their points when it came to the practical aspect of yoga, that is when they became completely universal. Whoever it is, whether it is a Jaina master or whether it is a text written from a Vedantic perspective, such as Yoga Vasishtha, a very beautiful and very detailed major epical text from the Vedantic perspective on yoga, where Vasishtha says to his student Rama, who in fact in the very beginning says that I want to become a Jina. And Jina is a very specific word used only in a Buddhist and Jaina context for a realized soul. There, Yoga Vasishtha, who is also a great yogi, in fact, one of the great works on yoga, several great works on yoga are named after him. This is one of them. And he says that the Purusha of Sankhya, the indwelling spirit of Sankhya, the Sankhya refer to it as Purusha. The speakers who follow the teachings of the Upanishads, they refer to it as Brahman. The Yogachara Buddhists refer to it as consciousness only. The Madhyamakas, those who propagate the theory of emptiness, refer to it as emptiness. But this is the light that enlightens all these ideas, all these names. I'm teaching of that light. And these names which are given to that truth, they are kalpitaha, which means imagined names. They are made up names. They are names made up by scholars, by teachers, by masters to speak about this ineffable truth. So, the Vedantic masters, the Upanishadic masters, used maybe the word Brahman because that is what they liked. But it was not the only word. Even in the Vedic tradition, there was a more ancient word for it. Sat. Existence. Just pure existence, pure presence. That's all. Or sometimes another word in the Vedas you find skambha. Skambha means support. For example, this pillar is a support. So the support of everything. Skambha. This word is also used. Sometimes even the word uchishta has been used. Uchishta means leftover. After everything gets eliminated, everything gets dissolved, whatever remains. So sometimes this word is used. When everything that was created is dissolved, merges back, that which remains, that is the leftover. Uchishta, the leftover. So many different. Bhuman, not the mightiest, but Bhuman would be the most abundant one. Abundance, supreme abundance. Bhuman simply, not even the abundant one, but supreme abundance. So many different words are used. Atman, self, the self. Paramatman, the higher self. To point out that we are not speaking of this lower self, which is the one that we experience, the ego, which is a momentary and a limited concept of ourselves, but the self in which that ego arises, in which it exists, and into which it merges. That self. So for that, the higher self. So many different words are used just to speak of the ineffable one. And so one should not get lost in this. So when we speak of Brahman here in the context of the Upanishads, then we should keep this in mind. All is Brahman of the Upanishads. Now, the next section, the third section. And the third section is a few sentences which are about negation. May I not negate Brahman. May Brahman not negate me. May there be no negation. May there be no negation for me. As I said earlier in my talks, that the word Brahman does not only mean pure consciousness, it can also refer to these texts, these collection of teachings. The Veda is also referred to as Brahman. So if we take the word in that sense, it simply means that, and you change the translation a little bit, because the Sanskrit word can be translated in both ways, and you replace negate as abandon, then now let's read it. May I not abandon Brahman, which means may I not abandon the Vedas, which means may I never stop studying or teaching them. May I never stop doing svadhyaya, self-study. And may the Veda not abandon me, which means whatever I have incorporated into myself, may it never leave me. So it can be very simply explained like this. But since we have already spoken of the Brahman of the Upanishads, which cannot then refer to the Vedas, to the collection of teachings that are studied, but the very state of experience, we have to continue to use the word in that sense. And that is when the next section becomes about the two yogas. So just to remind you of the three yogas that we discussed the last time. Karma. Karma means action. So karma yoga, action as a means of yoga, which means meditation. So that would be the first yoga. The second one is bhakti. Bhakti, which means devotion. Devotion, translated as devotion, but as I pointed out, that devotion simply means supreme love. That's all. Bhakti simply means supreme love, highest love, greatest love. That is how bhakti is explained by the masters of bhakti. And then the third one is jnana yoga. Jnana yoga. Jnana yoga, which means knowledge as a means, as an instrument to reach that state of meditation. Now, sarvaṁ brahma upaniṣadaṁ, all is Brahman of the Upanishads. This incorporated jnana yoga. because it incorporated the knowledge of the masters. For the masters, it's an experience. For us, it is a knowledge. A knowledge which we have, because it is second-hand, we either have to accept it out of faith or reject it. So let us accept it out of faith because it is useful to accept it. It allows us to overcome hatred and the tendency to inflict suffering on others. That is why. So, it is jnana. It is still not vijnana. We are not speaking of vijnana. We are speaking of jnana. Jnana is a word. When Krishna uses jnana and vijnana he uses for experiential insight. And jnana he uses for knowledge which has been received from others. So when that becomes a means, then it is jnana yoga. So this one, all is Brahman of the Upanishads. This was an example of jnana yoga. Yes, the second section.
The first one, maybe it's like that was
I would say the first section cannot be included in these three. As I said the other day to you also, that the practice of yoga cannot be included. The practice of asana cannot be included into these three yogas, as we had that discussion. So in the same way, because that is about really thriving and strengthening the very instruments that we have. So it's the very foundation. Yes, it's kind of a preparation. It's kind of a preparatory. You can refer to it as a preparatory statement. So now, all is Brahman of the Upanishads has been covered, so we can remove jnana. Now what remains is karma and bhakti. Here the first one is karma. Let us focus first on this one because the immediate next section, may I not negate Brahman and how that leads to karma yoga. I will explain this. But I have to explain karma yoga a little bit more. The way the idea of karma yoga has been developed in the Bhagavad Gita, which is Yoga Shastra, the teachings on yoga. So, first of all, is the important idea that karma becomes yoga, which means an action becomes a means to meditation when it is done without a desire to enjoy its result. You get the point? Any action that is performed without a desire to enjoy its result. In other words, every action will have a result, and that result will come to me, but then not to enjoy it by oneself, but to share it with the divine. And when I say the divine, in the understanding of the Gita, because the divine is present within all beings, that is why it means to share with all beings without any consideration of caste, creed, or any other such limitations. That would be what we call in the language of the Gita as nishkama. Nishkama, kama means desire, and nish means without. Action which is performed without a desire for its fruits. That is the first thing. Then the next stage of karma yoga, as explained by Krishna, is action which, just add ideas, action which is performed without a desire for its results. This much we have already covered. Now add, for the uplift of the society, for the betterment of the society, for the betterment of all beings. This is the second thought that has been added to it. So, do you want me to write the Sanskrit words for this? Okay? So, this was the first one, and then the second one is Loka Sangraha. Loka means society, the world, and Sangraha is explained as uplift, for the uplift of society. This is the second thought that has been added. And there is a third thought also that has been added by Krishna towards the end, is action which is performed without a desire to enjoy its results for the upliftment of the society. The third thought now which is added, without a sense of doership, that I am doing this, not even taking the credit that I am serving, I am doing, but simply that it is happening. But this is the third and the most advanced stage. What we have to be concerned here is these two stages of Karma Yoga, which the next sentence, may I not negate Brahman, māhaṁ brahma nirākuryāṁ, may I not negate Brahman, leads to. What does it mean? What does this sentence mean? May I not negate Brahman? This is Karma Yoga. Yes, this is the Karma Yoga one. This much is Karma Yoga. And may Brahman not negate me. This is the result of devotion. So that's the devotional part. This is, because here, why this is Karma Yoga? Because may I not negate. So it's very much here the how should I say, can I say the onus or the emphasis? In this sentence, the emphasis is on me. I'm the one who has to take the step. And then in the second sentence is that now the second step has to be taken by the divine. So you see this difference. And that is the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Karma Yoga is very active. A person has to make an action, has to make an effort. And in Bhakti Yoga, there is total surrender. And you are in a situation of saying that I have done everything that I could do. Now, it's up to you. Now you have to lift me out of it. So that total surrender, that then is Bhakti Yoga. That is Ishvara Pranidhana, Patanjali's word for Bhakti Yoga, for devotion, Ishvara Pranidhana. So, now when he says that may I not negate Brahman, it means that may I lead a life in such a way, may I conduct myself in such a way, may I never conduct myself in such a way from which it seems that I have negated Brahman. I have negated this truth that everything is Brahman. So where does it lead? It leads again to the idea that the moment even a small little thought of hatred towards anyone arises, a small little thought of inflicting suffering on anyone arises, still we have negated Brahman. This is where it leads, because The assertion of Brahman was everything is consciousness, and the negation of Brahman is not everything is consciousness. So the moment we hate, the moment we inflict suffering, we conduct ourselves in practice as if, and for sure, we do this only because in that moment we have forgotten this truth. We have negated this truth. We have given up the awareness of this truth. How can I commit violence against someone or something if everything and everyone is Brahman, is the manifestation of the same consciousness that is the very essence of my being? How is it possible? Only when I forget this fundamental truth. So that is why this leads to what, and I'm not using this word in a limited sense, brahmacharya, a way of life that leads one to become Brahman. That only in that sense I'm using, because charya means a way of life, and a way of life that leads someone to become Brahman. And what does becoming Brahman mean? In very practical terms, philosophically, all Vedanta is about it, but in very practical terms, I think Mahabharata comes to the rescue, where Yayati, one of the forefathers of Krishna, he says that when someone doesn't commit any violence towards any being in thoughts, words, and deeds, which means completely follows the principle of non-violence, that is when he or she has become Brahman. That is the first thing. The second thing he mentions is fearlessness, which means neither he frightens anyone nor he fears anyone. Fearlessness, in Sanskrit, the word abhaya, not maybe in English, but the Sanskrit word abhaya is both sides. It means free from fear within oneself, and free from causing fear in someone else's thought. So that fearlessness and freedom from selfish attachment, and here I'm not speaking of love, I'm just speaking of this tendency to cling because it gratifies. So we are not even concerned about that object, we are just concerned about ourselves. So freedom from this selfish attachment and freedom from hatred. These four things, when these four things happen, then a person is said to become Brahman. That is what becoming Brahman means in the understanding of the masters. Does anyone know the Sanskrit word for saint? Saint. Can anyone tell me the Sanskrit word for saint? Sorry, Rishi. Rishi is a seer. Sorry? Shri. Shri is no. Huh? No, not also Bhagwan. Huh? Sorry? No, not sattva. Not also sattva. Sattva means the pure state of being, which is a state of mind. Huh? आपसे तो आशा थी मुझे. हैं? मैं भी ब्राह्मण, वो भी नहीं, जो मैं ढूंढ रहा हूँ वो आप बताइए. The word, the simple Hindi word for saint. Huh? Baba means grandfather. Huh? Deva means radiant being. Sadhu means a good man. Sannyasi means a renunciate, who has renounced everything. Huh? Which word? It's simple. Sant. Saint. The Sanskrit word for saint is santa. Santa. Yes. Santa. Sometimes when something is most evident, it becomes difficult to grasp it. Yes, Ji?
So then why Vishwamitra and discourse we call like even in the children book, they said how many saints like we say उनके ऊपर है वो नाम संख्या.
Yeah.
So how why we said if Santa is
There the word saint is being used. Yeah, because first of all, in fact, to tell you the truth, there is no word for saint in Sanskrit. even though saint and sant sound so similar, and yet they are radically different. They are radically different. So it was a tricky question. Even though, yes, everybody now translates saint as Santa. And why I say they are radically different is because saint has been derived from the Latin word sanctus, sanctified, holy. Someone who has been declared holy, someone who has been sanctified, officially declared. And that's why my father's mother, which means not his physical mother, because she passed away at a very young age when he was 5-6 years old, but his second mother, who looked for his education and everything, she was a French woman, Madame Louise Moreau, a journalist who had come to India with Mahatma Gandhi and then got very close to the Nehru family, to Indira Gandhi, etc. And she used to say that in India, you declare anybody saint very easily. In the West, it takes a lot. The first thing that it takes is that the person has to die. There are no living saints in Christianity. They have to die, and only after they die, and then when after many, many years they have certain things happen, certain miracles happen, people come forward and say that miracles happened to me, then they are declared to be saints. But because of the similarity of these two words, in Hindi, in Sanskrit we call all sant, and because of the similarity, it seems as if sant is saint, but they are two completely. That's why I say that when it has happened everywhere in the context of religion, dharma, santa, saint, tradition, sampradaya, everywhere the original Sanskrit meanings were forgotten, and partly the meanings that came in, they were imposed on Sanskrit words. The Sanskrit word santa simply means someone. Santa has been derived from the simple root as, which means to be. To be, that's all. So santa simply means someone who is present. That's all. Someone who leads his life. In fact, the definition of the Upanishads is asti Brahma. Brahman is everything. Iti ched veda, someone who has realized this, santamenam tato viduhu. He is declared to be a santa. Someone who has reached this realization that everything is Brahman and therefore conducts accordingly, leads, talks, acts, and thinks in accordance to this realization. Such a person is called Santa. So it is in that sense, that's why I said that it's radically different, because there is no idea of sanctity there, no idea. It's very simple. Just someone who lives his life. And that's why Santa, more importantly, has to be a living person. It has to be someone who is alive, who lives his life in accordance to these principles. And that's why anyone who is thought by the society, who is believed by the society to lead their lives in this awareness, they are referred to as Santa. So this was the effort from the side of the sadhaka, from the side of the practitioner, when he says that may I not negate Brahman, which means may I lead my life from now onwards, when I have accepted this, even if it's just accepted out of faith that everything is Brahman, let me make the effort to act and then to speak and ultimately even to think in such a way so that which is inspired that everything is a manifestation of this consciousness. So this is the very essence of Karma Yoga, the very essence of these two aspects of Karma Yoga. It is this which then inspires selfless action, which then inspires a yogin to work tirelessly for the uplift or for the betterment of the society. So this is the idea behind Karma Yoga. That's why I said, may I not negate Brahman. This is a pledge to follow Karma Yoga. Now comes the second one, which is effort. When I have made my effort, they say that when we take one step, the divine takes 100 steps towards us. When we take one step towards it, because that's all what we can take, tiny little baby steps, then that divine takes 100 steps towards us for every step. So that effort from the side of the divine, which is then referred to as grace, it is referred to as grace. That comes, a prayer for that grace is to be found in the second sentence of this section, may Brahman not negate me. But in this context, I will have to speak a little bit about the idea of grace because grace is it arose in a particular religious context. So to understand the idea from the yogic perspective, I will have to talk about the Sanskrit words for grace and explain what grace meant for the yogis, for the yogic masters. But this is what we will do in our next class. Any observations, questions, clarifications, please? Yes.
But Karma Yoga is also Ishvara Pranidhana, not only Bhakti Yoga.
As I think I also mentioned this in my previous class, Patanjali speaks of two Ishvara Pranidhanas. One Ishvara Pranidhana is in the first sutra of the second chapter in the context of Kriya Yoga. That Ishvara Pranidhana is the same as Karma Yoga of Krishna. And the Ishvara Pranidhana that he speaks of in the first chapter, okay, just a minute. The Ishvara Pranidhana, I'm still now with the second chapter, Ishvara Pranidhana. The Ishvara Pranidhana which he speaks of as the first sutra of the second chapter is Karma Yoga. The Ishvara Pranidhana that he speaks of as part of the niyamas, the fifth niyama, in Ashtanga Yoga, the completely previous, the exact previous word before asana, that Ishvara Pranidhana is Karma Yoga. So he mentions Karma Yoga, in fact, before even asana. Then he speaks of Ishvara Pranidhana again in the first chapter. And why I say again in the first chapter? Because the first chapter is addressed to the most advanced practitioner. The first half of the second chapter is for the intermediate practitioner, and the last half of the second chapter is for the beginner Ashtanga Yoga, the eight-limbed path of yoga, has been described in the context of the beginner. So when he speaks of Ishvara Pranidhana in the context of the beginner and the intermediate practitioner, he means Karma Yoga. And then when he goes deeper into his meditative practices and he speaks of preparation for entering into the deeper states of meditation in the first chapter, then when he speaks of Ishvara Pranidhana, that Ishvara Pranidhana is explained by the masters as Bhakti Yoga. So there are two Ishvara Pranidhanas in the Yoga Sutras. The two in the second chapter are Karma Yoga, in fact 3. So the two in the second chapter are Karma Yoga, and the one in the first chapter is about Bhakti Yoga. Yes, Ji.
So how we can say Mahamuni?
Mahamuni, the correct pronunciation, the correct translation in English of the word Muni would be contemplative. Contemplative, not saint. So Vasishtha, Vishwamitra, they were not even technically Munis, they were Rishis. They were Rishis, and Rishi means seers. Seers, they are great because they saw the mantras of the Vedas. About the mantras of the Vedas, we use specifically, this is only an expression allowed for Vedic mantras, that Vedic mantras are seen. Are seen in the sense, are seen in states of meditation by the internal mental eye. So there the emphasis is hearing, to differentiate from hearing, because I'm also hearing the Veda mantras, but that doesn't make me a rishi. I can recite the first Veda mantra, Om Agnimi Ede Purohitain Yajyasya Deva Mritvijam. You have heard it. Fine, but that doesn't make you a rishi. So throughout the lineages, there was a lot of emphasis on listening simply because for up to approximately Al-Biruni, when he came to India in the 10th century, he wrote that a few years before me, and he gives the name of a scholar in Kashmir and says that he was the first one to put the Vedas into writing against many. So before that, they were never committed to writing, even though Sanskrit is such an ancient language, and a script of Sanskrit, there are very ancient scripts of Sanskrit, but it was never committed to writing. It always had to be heard and memorized. And even today, these lineages exist, where from father to son, the whole Veda is completely memorized. So there are these very strong mnemonic traditions. Because for the Vedic traditions, the Veda is, because in the Vedic traditions there is no single founder. So what Buddha is for Buddhism, what Christ is for Christianity, what Muhammad is for Islam, the Vedas are for the Vedic traditions, which are not the sayings of one particular person, but hundreds and thousands of male and female teachers from all the different social levels. Whoever had this realization, their collection, it's their collection. So there was a lot of effort put into it, into listening. So, but then what made them different was that they didn't hear it from a teacher like us, but they saw it from in deep states of meditation. So a rishi is defined as someone who sees the Veda, who has seen the Veda mantras, which means a composer of the Vedic mantras. Muni is contemplative. So rish means to know. So rishi simply can be translated as a wise man, a wise person, a wise man, and rishika, a wise woman. And muni would be specifically a contemplative, and they come into the second category. Rishi is the higher category because they they collected the teachings, and then those who contemplated those teachings and lived the life in accordance, tested those teachings, interpreted those teachings, explained those teachings, they were called munis. Sorry? Santa, anybody. Santa, as I said, anybody who lives in that awareness. Yes, Santa. Santa can be used for anybody. Muni still. Yeah. I mean, don't talk about today. Because today everybody in the spiritual world is a rishi and a muni. These surnames have become so common. But this is only in the last 100 or 200, 300, 100 years or so. Earlier, they were used in a very specific technical context. So Santa can be used for anyone. Patanjali, for example, is not a rishi, but he is a muni. And not only a muni, but a mahamuni. There are many munis, and he is a great contemplative. He has had tremendous influence on the contemplative traditions. The Buddha is referred to as Mahamuni. The Buddha, often in the Buddhist writings, is referred to as Mahamuni, as the great contemplative. So there the word Mahamuni is used. All doubts resolved? More doubts created. Okay. That means a ray has entered. Okay. I'm here to remove them as far as I can. So give me some work. Looking for work. Okay. Let us conclude today, as the time is over, with the universal prayer. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः. My humble salutations to you. Thank you very much.